The New York City terror attack surely gave all of us a scarier Halloween than we bargained for. Yes, indeed, Sayfullo Saipov, a 29-year-old radicalized Islamist terrorist, took us all on a very scary ride along with him when he drove his truck down on Lower Manhattan near Ground Zero. This particularly wounded and affected me because I'm a born and bred New Yorker. And whenever, just like with 9/11, whenever whenever terrorists attack New York, it's particularly painful. And of course, my heart goes out to the families of the victims. Let's talk about this and this was particularly personal because I had stayed in a hotel that was right in the area, right near Ground Zero, just at 9/11 because I was launching my book, Lions and Tigers and Terrorists, Oh My, How to Protect Your Child in a Time of Terror. And in fact, this book addresses exactly the kind of thing that happened this Halloween, in the sense that it helps parents and teachers talk to their kids about terrorism, whether it's a terrorist attack, of course, when they want to know what happened and why, but just about terrorism in general so that they can become more resilient and prepared for the next attacks. And just for hearing the barrage of news about terrorism every day. Well, let me tell you about some of the things that you may be feeling. This attack particularly impacted psychologically people in New York and kids. Because people in New York, because it was so near Ground Zero, that it brought back flashbacks, it brought back memories, triggered memories of 9/11. And memories that people who have PTSD try to avoid. So you might be feeling anxious, you might be feeling depressed, particularly if you lost someone in 9/11, and all of these kinds of feelings will be brought back up. Now, it also particularly affects kids because whenever there's a terror attack where kids are involved, kids identify with the kids who were the victims, and they feel especially vulnerable. Now, as you may know, it turns out that this terrorist, who's very proud, by the way, he's in the hospital and he's asking for an ISIS flag and he's boasting about what he did. He's actually thrilled about how effective his attack was. And it turns out he admitted that he was aiming for kids. And he purposely chose Halloween, and undoubtedly he purposely chose to go near Ground Zero. So he hit a school bus, that's what stopped him, but unfortunately, of course, there were kids and teachers in the school bus, and it was a special needs school bus. So when kids hear about this, as they will in the media, and of course all the kids who were at those schools, there was an elementary school right at the site, there was a high school right at the site, so those kids really will be impacted. So you need to talk to your kids. If you're a teacher, if you're a parent, if you're a grandparent, if you have anything to do with kids, you need to recognize that kids will be affected, although they may not tell you about it. Now, because especially if you don't give them an opening, if you don't give them the sense that you want to hear their feelings. Because so many adults, grown-ups, because we oftentimes go into denial ourselves, we don't want to think about terrorism, even though it's in the news every night. We try to protect ourselves, and it's a thing called cognitive dissonance, where on the one hand we hear the news, but on another hand we quickly push it into our unconscious mind so that we can forget about it. So it's hard when you're in denial to recognize the psychological symptoms that kids may be showing, whether you're a teacher, and these are kids in your classroom, or you're a parent and these are kids in your home. They are going to be showing signs of distress, and you may well not recognize that this relates to this terror attack or hearing about terrorism in general, because they don't usually use the word terror. So, and because these symptoms can show themselves in the days or the weeks or the months following an attack or following some big news about terror. So it's hard to put it together. So that's why you need to start from the beginning and talk to kids about terrorism. Again, not just when there's an attack, but just even better, when there isn't an attack, and you can sort of more gently, more slowly, more gradually talk to them about terrorists and terrorism. So now, there are going to be a lot of parents who talk when they are, if their kids ask about what happened in New York on Halloween, they're going to say, oh, well, some driver, had an accident and he ran into some people on the bikes and on the sidewalk in a bus. Or some parents might say, a bad man ran over some people. If you don't mention the word terror or terrorist or terrorism, kids are going to be hearing that word guaranteed on television, the radio, the internet, and they're going to wonder why you told them that it was just some man having an accident. It's kind of like what happened on the anniversary this year of 9/11, when most newscasts didn't mention the terrorists in the planes. That it was as if these two planes fell, went the wrong direction and went into the World Trade Center. That's how much we want to sort of deny that there's this problem and this threat out there. So instead of telling your kids it's a driver who can't drive, you need to tell them that he was a terrorist. And then, of course, they'll say, well, what's a terrorist? Now, I explain to kids that a terrorist, in the book and in person, in my practice and so on, as the terrorist therapist helping families cope with terrorism, I tell people that a terrorist is like the big bully on the playground. He wants to boss you around, he wants you to get you to believe the things he believes, and so on. And then to go further, if children ask more questions, or they're a little older, or they can understand more, you can explain what terrorism is. That there are some men who are terrorists who try to get people to believe that the holy book, the Quran, tells them to kill, when in fact that's a misinterpretation of the Quran. And you do need to always say that most Muslims are peaceful. And then, of course, there's the whole issue, and I talk about this in the book, about domestic terrorists. So the first part of the book is for adults. It's like a regular book for adults, how to talk to kids about terrorism, how to recognize their symptoms, how to do things with the family that will make them more resilient before there's a terror attack, and so on. But then the part that's really important, because it's the first and only book about terrorism for kids, I have a picture book in here, which really goes into all of these explanations about what terrorists are, and about what terrorism is, and so on, all the hard things in a way that is psychologically appropriate. So it's super important to explain all of these things. Now, there was a study done just recently that looked at the demographics of people who are worried and aren't worried about terrorism. And they found, perhaps not surprisingly, that the people who were most worried about terrorism were more likely to be Republicans, and the people who were less likely to be worried about terrorism were Democrats. But I can tell you that when Saipov drove his truck down the street, hitting people left and right, he did not ask them first, are you a Democrat or a Republican? Terrorism is something we all need to be concerned about. Not hiding under the covers, but making ourselves more resilient, and even more importantly, making our children more resilient. So you can find out more about my views about terrorism. Of course, there are the vlogs like this, and there are podcasts, and you can find it all on my website, which is terroristtherapist.com, www.terroristtherapist.com. And you can buy the book wherever books are sold, bookstores, online, and so on. And you can also buy it online from the publisher, which the website is www.terroristtherapist.com. terrorismforkids.com. Terrorism, the number 4, kids.com.